Welcome to 5 at 5 with Stone Law Offices. I'm attorney Brendan Bybee, and this is 5 minutes on unequal inheritances. Now, if you have no estate plan at all, your estate is going to be distributed to your closest surviving heirs. Now, if that's a spouse, then it's going 100% to that spouse. If you have kids, however, if you have surviving descendants, then it's going to be divided equally amongst that closest class of surviving relatives. So children, if you have multiple children, then under intestate succession in probably every state, certainly in the state of Nevada, it's going to be divided equally amongst those children. Now, if you create a will or a trust to pass on your property at death, then you have an opportunity to decide how you want to divide that the pool of assets that you leave behind up amongst those beneficiaries. And you can decide whether or not you leave it to all of them, whether you leave it equally or leave it in unequal shares amongst them. And you may have a variety of reasons for doing this. And you may find that some are already well enough off on their own. They have successful careers, and therefore the money is will have less impact on their lives. Perhaps there's one who is not as good with money, you're not sure you trust them, or there may be any number of situations, including where maybe some children were closer by, were more involved in your care near the end of life, and you want to reward them for perhaps in some cases reordering their life around you to be able to provide you care. Now, there may be any number of other valid reasons for doing this, and whatever your reasons are, they are your reasons, and you have a right to make those decisions about how it's going to be divided up. However, when you do give unequal distributions of unequal inheritances, it can create some obstacles or some difficulties. Now, you won't be around to deal with those difficulties, generally speaking, unless you have conversations ahead of time. But once you're gone, and those whatever you've put in place is going to kind of be enacted and divided according to your will or your trust, you won't be there to deal with that, but your heirs will. Whoever those beneficiaries are, they will have to deal with that unequal division of assets. Now, there may be a variety of responses to that. You may have beneficiaries who, because they're on the short end of the stick, feel slighted by that. And you may, of course, have those who are delighted or perhaps even uncomfortable for having a larger share. So how do you deal with that? What are the issues that might raise? Well, anytime you are changing what would be an ordinary distribution, it can cause that sort of uneasiness or discomfort or disappointment, and that can also lead to litigation or disputes amongst the beneficiaries. You may have relationships amongst those children be harmed because they now are uncomfortable because of how they interpreted that event or that division of assets in terms of how their relationship was with you. And that can affect their relationship with one another. Again, it can make disappointment in those who are left without as much, and it can make some discomfort sometimes for those who unexpectedly are receiving more, and so that's something to keep in mind. How can you deal with then the difficulties that may come from these unequal distributions, knowing that you have valid reasons and perhaps reasons that feel essential to you for creating that kind of a division? Well, oftentimes, like I said, there's disappointment that can come into play. There can just be misunderstanding about what were your reasons. Now, you may think they're obvious. It may be obvious to you that this family sort of reordered their lives, moved in with you to care for you over these years. It may surprise you to find that the other family members don't always see that as the sacrifice that you see it as, whether that's a fair assessment or not. But those kinds of factors can be in play. So, besides just leaving things up to them, sort of you're assuming that they will understand what your reasons were. It can be helpful at times to discuss these things ahead of time, or even to leave some instruction or some letter of intent, just explaining yourself to those beneficiaries, to give them an idea of what your mindset was. Now, they may disagree with your opinion, with your determination, your judgment in that call, but it's your call to make. But what setting that does, it won't necessarily make everybody feel at peace or happy about getting less than their fair share. But what it may do is reduce the conflict between them, between those family members. Not in every case, but in some cases it may do that. It may relieve some of the shock and surprise that comes when unexpectedly there's an unequal division. And if you can address things or have a family discussion ahead of time where you can communicate about these things and give some idea about your feelings in an environment, hopefully, that you can kind of control the discussion, then you may be able to see some of those issues, to be able to anticipate them, and to be able to head off that disappointment and that shock and avoid some of those difficulties. Like I say, you will not be able to do that in every case. Hopefully, the circumstances and your family relationships are such that a brief explanation for an unequal division will be understood and accepted without any difficulty. But you should recognize that whenever you're doing an unequal division, that it's not just property that you're passing in the minds of, in the eyes of those who are receiving it. They will impute your feelings about them into those gifts, and if not disabused of their own self-deceptions about those things and the meanings of those divisions, you may leave the wrong impression when it's your last impression to leave. So again, as I've mentioned in other videos, communication can go a long way to avoiding conflict and difficulty. And but in any case, always take a thoughtful approach to making the gifts and carrying out your wishes, which you have every right to do. If you have questions about this, if you have an interesting division or difficulties deciding how to divide your estate amongst your heirs, then you should talk to an attorney. You should come call us at Stone Law Offices. We can sit down and talk about the particularities of your estate and your descendants and your intended beneficiaries, and how best to structure that, and how best to avoid disappointment and shock, and hopefully maintain peace amongst your beneficiaries. Hope this is informative to you, and hopefully hear from you soon.